The bass from the speakers was a physical thing, a pounding rhythm that vibrated through the soles of my shoes and up into my bones. The engagement party was in full swing, a whirl of colored lights, laughter, and clinking glasses. It was everything I had ever dreamed of for this night. Everything, that is, except for the absence of the groom. Liam had been acting strangely all week, distant and preoccupied, but I'd chalked it up to pre-engagement jitters. He'd pursued me for 3 years with a single-minded intensity that had worn down all my defenses. He was the golden boy, the charismatic student body vice president to my president, the man who had, according to the campus legend that had grown around us, given up a spot at a world-renowned university to stay close to me. My best friend, Chloe, nudged me with her elbow, her smile wide and infectious. "Stop worrying, Alara. He's probably just stuck in traffic or dealing with some last-minute family drama. He wouldn't miss this for the world." I forced a smile back, trying to absorb her confidence. He was right. The Liam I knew adored me. This was our night. Then my phone lit up on the table, screen glowing with a new message. My heart did a little flip. Finally. I snatched it up, my smile already genuine this time. But it wasn't an apology for being late. It was a guillotine. "Liam, Alara, cancel the party. It's over. We're done." The words didn't make sense. I read them again, then a third time, the pounding music fading into a dull, roaring static in my ears. The vibrant party around me seemed to slow down, the laughing faces blurring into grotesque masks. This had to be a mistake. A horrible, cruel joke. Chloe, seeing the blood drain from my face, leaned over. "Elle? What's wrong?" Her eyes scanned the message and her own smile vanished, replaced by shock and then immediate protective fury. "What the hell? Oh. No way. He's messing with you. Someone probably dared him to send that. It's just Liam being an idiot." A fragile hope, thin as glass, sprung up in my chest. A dare. It was stupid, childish, but it was the only explanation that didn't shatter my entire reality. With trembling fingers I typed back. "Be very funny. Truth or dare lose." I hit send and held my breath. The seconds stretched into eternity. And then the deliverance of my hope. A string of glaring red exclamation marks. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, message not delivered. He had blocked me. The glass hope shattered, cutting me deep. Chloe saw it on my face and exploded. "That spineless, pathetic worm. I swear to God, Alara, I'm going to find him, Anne." Another friend across the table gasped, staring at her phone. "Guys, everyone look at this." A cold dread washed over me. I didn't want to look. But Chloe was already pulling up the social media profile on her own phone. And there was Liam's latest post, timestamped just minutes ago. A photo. 2 hands intertwined. One was Liam's, I knew every line of it. The other, adorned with a delicate, expensive-looking diamond ring that was not the one we'd picked out together, belonged to my stepsister, Serafina. The caption was a single heartless word: forever. The air left my lungs in a rush. Our entire group of friends saw it simultaneously, and the table erupted in a firestorm of furious whispers and traded looks of sheer outrage. The sympathetic, pitying glances they turned on me made my nose burn and hot, traitorous tears well in my eyes. I looked down, trying to compose myself, to hide the utter devastation. But no one noticed that beneath the veil of my hair, the corners of my mouth, which I was fighting hard to suppress, were curving upward. The carefully constructed image of the perfect couple, the fairy tale romance I had worked so hard to build, it had just been publicly obliterated by him. And he had done it with Serafina. He couldn't have chosen a more perfect weapon to use against me if he'd tried. My friends were already morphing into a vengeful militia, phones out, voices sharp with plans for retribution. Where is he? How could he do this? That which, I always knew there was something about her. I said nothing, just let the tears fall. Tears of genuine shock, yes, but also of anticipation. I had thought they would keep their cool, that I'd have to stoke this fire myself. Turns out, their loyalty was a powder keg and Liam had just lit the fuse. With a few well-placed, distraught clues from me, he mentioned a hotel downtown for a surprise after-party, but I thought it was for us. My besties turned into detectives. Chloe, with her thousands of online followers, started a live stream, her voice shaking with righteous anger. "We're going to find answers tonight, people. Stay tuned." It didn't take long. From a few scattered digital breadcrumbs, They tracked them down to the Grand Crescent Hotel. The pack was on the hunt and I, the wounded prey, was swept along in the center, their mission to get justice for my wasted youth. We stormed into the opulent hotel lobby, a wave of determined fury, only to be met by a stoic front desk clerk. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice impeccably polite and entirely immovable. "We cannot disclose guest information. It's policy." Chloe slammed her hand on the counter. "Policy? My friend's fiancé is upstairs right now cheating on her with her sister. What kind of policy protects that?" Another friend, Maya, turned on the waterworks, her voice a pleading whisper. "Please, miss. They were supposed to get engaged tonight. We need an explanation." The receptionist looked genuinely conflicted, caught between protocol and human drama. I saw my moment. I stepped forward, my face a mask of shattered calm, and silently slid my black credit card across the polished marble counter. "Please," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Just open the room next door for me. I just need to hear it from him myself." The conflict on her face resolved into something else. Understanding, perhaps, or just the undeniable authority of premium platinum. Her face brightened immediately. "Of course, ma'am. Right this way." We rode the elevator up in a tense silence. The hallway was plush and quiet, a stark contrast to the storm raging within our group. We found the room. And to our collective shock, the door was slightly ajar, as if in their frantic, passionate rush, they'd forgotten to close it properly. Chloe with her phone held high, still live streaming, and I slipped inside first. The scene was a cliché of betrayal. Clothes were strewn from the doorway to the foot of the king-sized bed. A discarded room service cart. The foil packaging of a condom lay torn open on the floor, the edges jagged as if ripped by teeth. And then we heard it. The nauseating, rhythmic creak of the bed, accompanied by soft, breathy moans. I felt my friends tense behind me, their fury a palpable heat. Then Serafina's voice, "I don't know if she'll be able to take this." I could practically see her fake pout, her wide, innocent eyes. His voice hardened, dripping with a contempt I had never heard directed at me. "She's nothing but a damn leech, clinging to me and refusing to let go. She's the one who chased after me, then pretended to be so pure. A princess like that, I can't be bothered to serve her. Sarah, the only person I want to marry is you. Leech. Pretended to be pure. Can't be bothered to serve me." The man who had whispered love poems into my hair, who had crafted a grand public myth of sacrificing his future for me, was now painting me as a desperate, pathetic burden. The narrative he was spinning for her was his own pathetic excuse, but hearing it aloud in that voice was a different kind of wound. But the first ones who couldn't hold back weren't me. They were my girlfriends. With a collective cry of outrage, they stormed into the bedroom like a whirlwind of vengeance. Chloe's live stream camera aimed directly at the tangled, exposed forms of the two loves of each other's lives. The romance vanished, replaced by flustered, pathetic scrambling as they yanked the sheets over themselves. The moment Liam's eyes met mine over Chloe's shoulder, his face darkened into a mask of sheer hostility. "Elara." His voice was sharp, a weapon. "What the hell are you trying to pull?" Serafina, half naked under the blanket, deliberately pressed her body against his, her voice trembling with a performative sweetness. "Sister, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen, but I really couldn't control myself. Liam is just too good. Please let us be together. He doesn't love you, and if you keep forcing it, neither of you will ever be happy. I'm doing this for your own good." Liam wrapped his arm possessively around her waist, his tone dripping with disdain as he declared, "Why waste words on her? From start to finish, the only one I've loved is Serafina." Nestled in his arms, Serafina gazed at me with tear-filled eyes that held a glint of pure, unadulterated triumph. Her lips moved, silently forming a mocking taunt just for me. "You lose." It was then that my friends finally snapped. Maya, from somewhere, produced a huge bucket of ice water from the melted ice machine down the hall. Without a second's hesitation, she dumped it straight over the adulterous pair on the bed. Liam immediately threw himself over Serafina to shield her, his eyes filled with a tender concern for her that made my stomach turn. The contrast was breathtaking. My knight in shining armor was now her human shield, protecting her from the consequences they both so richly deserved. I forced myself to remain calm, my voice unervingly steady amidst the chaos. "Let's go." I turned and walked away without a second glance. But as I reached the door, I allowed myself one last look back, the corners of my lips curving into a faint, cold smile. Serafina, I thought. You and I were both born from the shadows of this family. We were always destined to be enemies. But to be my enemy, you have to be at my level. You're not even close. The car ride home was a symphony of rage. My friends' voices overlapped, a turbulent sea of plans for further retaliation, curses aimed at Liam and Serafina, and fervent promises of support for me. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the neon-soaked city blurring past, letting their fury wash over me. I didn't need to say a word. My silence, my pale face, the single tear I allowed to trace a path down my cheek. It was all the fuel they needed. Chloe was still riding the high of her live stream. It's already going viral, Al. The comments are insane. Everyone is on your side. They're calling him scumbag Liam and her homewrecker Sarah. This is going to follow them forever. I gave a weak, grateful squeeze to her hand. I can't believe it. Any of it. It was the truth, just not the whole truth. I couldn't believe his audacity, his stupidity. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd done it in the most publicly humiliating way possible, and he'd left a digital trail a mile wide. He had handed me the weapon himself. That very night, the intimate, grainy footage from the hotel room exploded across every university forum and social media platform. The narrative was too perfect to resist. The golden couple, the student body president and vice president, the epic love story built on sacrifice, shattered on the eve of their engagement by a treacherous stepsister. The court of public opinion convened and delivered its verdict instantly. Liam was a cheating liar. Serafina was a backstabbing snake. And I was the tragic, sympathetic heroine. But it didn't stop there. Chloe's live stream had been picked up by gossip sites. The names Liam and Serafina started climbing the real-world trending lists. And with that notoriety came consequences far beyond campus gossip. Liam's family owned the Croft Enterprises, a respected conglomerate. By morning, the news of his scandalous behavior was splashed across financial blogs. The words management instability and ethical concerns were thrown around. I watched on my tablet in bed, a cold cup of coffee beside me as Croft's stock price began to dip, then tumble, a flashing sea of red on the board. As for Serafina, her fledgling acting career was eviscerated. A barely relevant D-lister who'd recently gained a sliver of attention for a dramatic fall on a red carpet, she was now climbing in popularity for all the wrong reasons. The comments on her latest professional post were brutal. Casting directors would see this. Her reputation wasn't just damaged, it was atomized. A small, cold part of me relished it. But it was far from enough. This was just the court of public opinion. It was noise. It wasn't the structured, devastating ruin they truly deserved. Serafina, you deserve to rot in hell for what you've done. And I'm going to be the one to put you there. The next morning I found Liam waiting for me outside my dorm. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usually impeccable appearance rumpled, his face a twisted canvas of anger and a flicker of something that might have been guilt. Alara, he started, his voice tight. Do you really have to be this heartless? I stared at him, saying nothing. My silence unnerved him. Go online, he demanded. Make a statement. Say clearly that we broke up a long time ago. That this is all a misunderstanding. I took a deliberate step back, putting distance between us. I let my eyes well up, making them red-rimmed and wounded. My voice was heavy with emotion. Today is supposed to be our engagement, Liam. He snapped, reaching out to grab my wrist. His grip was too tight. I'm already married. I married her yesterday. It's done. We're over. Can you stop embarrassing yourself? Do you want everyone to laugh at us? I wrenched my arm free. Laugh at us? There is no us. There's you and the mess you made. He ran a hand through his hair, trying a different tack. His voice softened into that familiar, persuasive tone that had once made me believe in fairy tales. Alara, I know this is sudden, but I can't lie to myself. The person I've always loved is Serafina, not you. I tried to love you. I really did. I cut him off with a bitter, broken laugh that wasn't entirely faked. The sheer revision of history was breathtaking. Then why didn't you say it sooner? Why wait until the day before our engagement? Why let me plan a party, book a venue, invite everyone we know? Why tell me you loved me yesterday morning? His expression turned icy, the mask of contrition slipping to reveal the sharp, ugly hatred beneath. Because you stole everything that belonged to Serafina. Her father's attention, her place in that family, her inheritance. You think I didn't see it? The projection was so blatant it was almost funny. I stole from her? The girl who had moved into my home, whose mother had systematically tried to erase my mother's memory. Who stole from who, Liam? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Who destroyed who? Don't pretend you were an innocent bystander. You and Serafina plotted this together. You think I don't know that? I took a step closer, my eyes locked on his. Of course, I've prepared a wedding gift in return. One the two of you will never forget. My eyes were still rimmed with red, but my voice was steady. I pressed him again. This entire engagement banquet today was arranged by me alone. I planned every detail. And you? What did you contribute? He puffed out his chest, arrogant even in his disgrace. I paid for the hotel. The Grand Crescent isn't cheap. Isn't that enough? A perfect cold smile touched my lips. Perfect. Then I'll make sure you pay a price far heavier than that. Liam, I only hope you're strong enough to handle what's coming. Elara, just post the statement online, he begged, his composure breaking. Say we broke up a long time ago. I laughed, a cold, hollow sound. Yesterday counts as a long time ago. Frustration boiled over in him. For you, I gave up my chance to attend a top university. I repeated a year. Why can't you do this one little thing for me? It won't even affect you. If I were the girl he thought I was, perhaps I would have been swayed by this. The myth of his sacrifice had always been his trump card. But I knew the truth. I had always known. You didn't retake the exams because of me, Liam, I said, my voice flat. You missed the final English test because of Serafina. She had planned to put laxatives in my milk so I wouldn't make it to the exam. But she was clumsy. She poisoned herself, suffered diarrhea and internal bleeding. She'd wanted me to fail, so she got our stepmother to dismiss all the servants to cover it up. But she was greedy and used too much. When her life was in danger, you had to rush her to the hospital. I tilted my head. Liam, was your retake really for me? The color drained from his face. I had just recounted a secret he thought was buried forever. Elara, what are you trying to say? I'm saying you didn't get into university because you chose to skip your exam to save her. I wasn't the one at fault. I passed. I got in. You made your choice. His face was a stone mask. The guilt was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated fury. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Think about all the years we've been together. Just help me this once. Post the clarification. Please. I only shook my head lightly, my smile faint and unwavering. His composure shattered completely. A smug, ugly grin spread across his face. He was switching to his final card, the one he thought would always force me to yield. Fine. You want to play it this way? I still have those clips of you, Elara. Moaning in my bed. Want me to show them to you again? Just to remind you what you'll be sharing with the world. I stood my ground in silence, my heart hammering against my ribs but my expression unchanging. His threat was a stale one. He mistook my silence for fear. His grin widened. You better not show up at the wedding today. After it's over, I expect to see your statement online. He turned and walked away, believing he had won. I watched his retreating back, the corners of my lips lifting into a genuine cold smile. Liam, I thought. Everything you did to me, everything Serafina did to me and my mother. Your day of reckoning has finally come. The real show is just about to begin. I went back inside, my mind already shifting to the next move. I took a taxi downtown to the Grand Crescent. The place that was supposed to host my engagement was now hosting his wedding. The haste of their planning was laughably obvious. In the grand ballroom, they hadn't even had time to replace the wedding photos. They had simply taken the engagement photos of Liam and me, photos I had meticulously art-directed, and crudely pasted Serafina's face over mine. Even the elegant script on the place cards and invitations still bore my name, Elara. The whole ceremony was a cheap, pathetic farce. The guests were a who's who of business associates, their faces masks of polite confusion. They knew me. They knew the story. They could see the shoddy Photoshop, the rush job. In their hearts, they were already marking deductions, recalculating their alliances. Croft Enterprises might have been Liam's family business, But everyone in that room knew who really understood the operations, who held the relationships. Liam was a handsome puppet. And I was the largest shareholder of my mother's company, Ethereum Group. They knew which side held the real power. Serafina stood near the altar next to Liam, her smile bright and triumphant. A vision in a gown that was undoubtedly too expensive, trying to flaunt her victory. But the moment her eyes scanned the crowd and landed on me, standing calmly in the doorway, her face went pale. "Sister," she squeaked, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "What are you doing here?" Liam's head whipped around. His expression instantly darkened into a thunderous glare. "Alara, why are you here? I told you not to come. I'm not marrying you." I curved my lips into a serene smile and looked straight at Serafina, ignoring him completely. My voice carried clearly in the hushed room. "Serafina, if someday you can't find a job," I said sweetly, "you and your mother can always open a scrap shop together. After all, you're already so good at collecting other people's discarded things." Her face shifted from white to a mottled, furious red. But I didn't spare her another glance. I walked straight down the aisle and sat down at the empty seat at the main family table as if I belonged there. My stepmother, Diana, was already there, her expression so tight it looked like it might crack. "Alara," she said stiffly, "today is your sister's wedding. You wouldn't want the Hart family to lose face, would you?" I leaned close to her, my voice a whisper meant only for her ears. "Is Serafina really a member of the Hart family, Diana?" Her eyes widened in shock as if I'd struck her. I saw the fear there, raw and immediate. I sneered softly. "Do you think my father knows the truth? The real truth?" Her face flushed with rage and panic. She pressed a finger to the philtrum beneath her nose, a nervous habit she had to steady herself. I glanced casually to the side where one of the servers was pouring champagne. It was Chloe in a stolen waiter's outfit. She met my gaze and gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible wink. Everything was ready. Now all we needed was for the main actors to step onto the stage. The lights in the hall began to dim and a warm spotlight stretched down the aisle. Liam, dressed in an obscenely expensive suit, waited at the altar trying to look proud but only managing to look strained. The music swelled. The doors opened. And there was Serafina on the arm of my father, walking slowly toward her doom. My father's face was a forced smile, but his eyes held a sorrowful reluctance I had never once seen directed at me. Seeing it now for her left me feeling nothing but a cold, dead silence inside. At the exact moment my father placed Serafina's hand into Liam's, the large screen behind the altar, which had been displaying their poorly doctored photos, suddenly flickered and went dark. A hush fell over the room. Then grainy black and white security footage flickered to life. The images were shaky, taken from a high angle but unmistakable. It was a hotel room. A different one. And the sounds, indecent, desperate moans filled the hall, echoing from the speakers. "Serafina. Oh, Serafina," a man's voice groaned again and again. But the man in the video, his face blurred but his overweight, greasy physique all too clear, was not Liam. Serafina's face turned deathly pale. She let out a shrill, piercing scream. "Turn it off. Turn it off now." The footage started quickly and ended just as fast, leaving a stunned, ringing silence in its wake. On stage, Serafina's eyes were wide with horror. She clutched Liam's arm, her voice a frantic whisper everyone could hear. "Liam, that's not me. I never betrayed you. Someone must have done this on purpose to drive us apart. They don't want me to marry you." Liam gripped her hand tightly, his eyes cold as they locked onto me from across the room. He was so deep in denial, so invested in his chosen narrative, that he couldn't see the truth staring him in the face. "Alara," he spat, his voice cutting through the silence. "Must you really be this cruel? How dare you Photoshop a video to frame Serafina?" He turned to the crowd, a picture of defiant, misguided loyalty. "Let me tell you all, Serafina is the only love of my life. I believe her. She would never do something like that." Those heartfelt vows poured every ounce of blame onto me. Serafina, seeing her opening, let tears shimmer in her eyes. She looked at me with a pitiful expression. "Sister, why are you doing this to me? I know you don't like me, but this is my wedding. Do you really want to ruin my whole life?" Her words were a match to gasoline. Diana, my stepmother, snapped. Unable to control her rage and seeing her daughter's perfect day implode, She seized a sharp steak knife from the table setting in front of her and lunged at me. Her movements were clumsy, fueled by blind fury. If I'd wanted to, I could have easily dodged. But I didn't. I met her halfway, my own movement looking like a frantic attempt to defend myself. I caught her wrist, and then with a calculated twist, I drove the blade straight into my own abdomen. A searing pain exploded in my side. And then I laughed. A chilling, liberating laugh that froze her in her tracks, her eyes wide with shock and confusion, just as I had expected. Panicked, she tried to pull the knife back, but it was too late. The scene was chaos. Guests screamed. Before she could process what had happened, hotel security rushed in and pinned her to the ground. Everything had happened so fast, yet all of it was within my plan. As the world dissolved into shouting and panic, and the warm blood soaked through my dress, I looked at Diana being dragged away, at Serafina's horrified face, at Liam's stunned expression. The pawn had just taken the queen. And the game was far from over. The world was a blur of sterile white and beeping sounds. I swam up through layers of thick chemical-induced sleep, each beep from the machine beside my bed a lighthouse guiding me back to consciousness. The first thing I registered was the dull, throbbing ache in my abdomen, a constant reminder of the calculated risk I'd taken. Then came the voices. Hushed, tense, familiar. I opened my eyes slowly, letting them adjust to the harsh fluorescent light. The private hospital room was already full of people. Of course it was. My father, Alistair Hart, a man whose presence in my life was as reliable as a solar eclipse, stood by the window, his back to me, shoulders stiffer than I'd ever seen them. And there they were, flanking my bed like grieving saints. Liam and his new wife, my stepsister Serafina. The moment Serafina saw my eyelids flutter open, she launched into her performance. She rushed to my bedside, her face a masterpiece of contrition, and grabbed my limp hand with both of hers. Her touch felt like ice. "Sister. You're awake. Thank God," she gushed, tears already welling in her eyes. They were impressively on demand. "Mom," she didn't mean it. She was just confused for a moment. Everything that day happened so suddenly. She only acted on instinct. She squeezed my hand, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Who wouldn't feel upset seeing their daughter treated like that? You're a daughter too, Lara. You should understand a mother's love." I let my gaze drift over her shoulder to my father, who had turned to watch us, his expression unreadable. I let out a dry, weak laugh that hurt my stitches. "So," I croaked, my throat parched. "What you mean is I deserve to be stabbed." She panicked, shaking her head, her tears now flowing freely. No, you misunderstood me. I want you to sign the waiver for Mom." She gestured to a document on the bedside table. "She's getting old. I don't want her to go to prison. You're understanding, Alara. I know you'll forgive her, right?" She leaned in closer, her voice taking on a sickly sweet manipulative tone that made my skin crawl. "If your mother were still alive, you wouldn't want to see her spend the rest of her life behind bars either, would you?" She paused, letting the cruelty of the comparison hang in the air. "Maybe you don't understand because you lost your mother so long ago, but a mother means everything to a daughter. You can hit me, scold me, but please don't make things hard for Mom. She's your mother too in a way. Every girl deserves to have her own family standing strong behind her." That was it. The carefully crafted plea, laced with poison about my dead mother. My patience already thin snapped. I pulled my hand out of hers with a sudden strength that surprised even me. Then, with all the force I could muster from my hospital bed, I swung my arm and slapped her across the face. The crack was shockingly loud in the quiet room. The impact was hard enough that the foreline in my other arm jerked, the blood surging backward into the tube in a dark red wave. "You," I hissed, the pain in my side flaring white-hot, "do not deserve to mention my mother." The unexpected violence froze the entire room. For a second, there was only the sound of Serafina's sharp intake of breath and the relentless beeping of my heart monitor. Then chaos erupted. Liam and my father moved as one, lunging forward to drag a sobbing Serafina away from my bed, putting a safe distance between her and the suddenly feral invalid. "Alara, have you lost your mind?" my father roared, his face purpling with rage as he cradled a hysterical Serafina. I curled my lips into a mocking smile, ignoring the fire in my gut. Once I, too, was a little girl protected and loved like a treasure by her mother. I locked eyes with him. She was the one who took my mother from me. My father's expression tightened. The mention of my mother, of his first wife, was a subject he always avoided. He deflected, his tone sharp and cutting. Alara, Serafina is your sister and Diana is your family. You caused chaos at your sister's wedding. Do you expect her not to blame you? Yet she still begged me to forgive you, saying you only acted out of heartbreak and this is how you repay her. He looked at me with genuine disgust. I raised you to become this ungrateful? Haven't you thought about how kind Diana has been to you all these years? Haven't you noticed there's nothing Serafina has that you don't? The lies were so colossal they were almost impressive. Diana's kindness had been a relentless campaign of subtle neglect and emotional manipulation. And the idea that Serafina and I had been treated equally was a joke. Back then when you let Liam go to her, it was your own choice, he continued, rewriting history without a hint of shame. As a person you should know gratitude. Otherwise you're no different from an animal. He gestured dismissively at me. Anyway, you're awake now and your injuries aren't serious. He picked up the waiver from the table and tossed it onto my bed as if it were trash. It landed on my legs. Sign it. The order was delivered with the expectation of immediate obedience. I gave a cold laugh, the sound harsh and ugly. With my free hand I yanked the 4 needle from my vein. A spike of pain followed by a trickle of blood. The 4 lines swung free. And if I don't sign? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. My father's carefully maintained facade finally cracked. What kind of child did I raise you to be? Alara, you're still alive, aren't you? So what if there was a fight in the family? If you hadn't ruined your sister's reputation today, Diana wouldn't have lost her temper. You're the one who's unreasonable. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. What do you think? No one will marry you after this. If your future husband finds out you sent your own stepmother to prison, who would dare take you in, Alara? People say to forgive when you can. Do you really want this? Behind him, partially hidden by my father's shoulder, Serafina stood. The red mark from my slap was vivid on her cheek, but her expression was one of pure, smug triumph. She deliberately lifted her chin, taunting me. Then she mouthed the words, silent and clear across the room. You and your mother are both trash, despised by the world. Dying early is better for everyone. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. I looked from her gloating face to my father's impatient one. Without breaking eye contact with him, I picked up the waiver. I didn't even look at it. I simply tore it in half, then again and again until it was a pile of shreds in my lap. I let the pieces flutter to the floor. My face was a mask of calm. You want me to sign? Over my dead body. Liam roared, finally finding his voice. Alara, enough of your games. He stepped forward, his eyes blazing. Don't forget, I still hold a few things of yours. Those clips. If you just sign the papers, I won't pursue the past and I'll return everything. After that, we'll each go our separate ways. I burst out laughing, the movement sending fresh jabs of pain through my side. Liam, what a joke. What do I have left to be afraid of? I've already lost everything. Aside from this cheap life of mine, there's nothing left that could bring me down. I met his gaze, my own utterly fearless. Bring it on, Liam. My father's eyes hardened, his tone colder than the ice pack on my stomach. Alara, as long as you sign the waiver, you'll remain the CEO of Ethereum. The mention of my mother's company, the company he had shamelessly stolen from her through scheming and lies, sent a fresh wave of fury through me. If you don't, he continued, his voice dropping to a threat, I will have no choice but to reconsider the leadership. He dared to bring up that name again. Ethereum was my mother's legacy, her life's work. And now he wanted to use it as a bargaining chip to free the woman who had helped destroy her, so he could hand it over to his imposter daughter. Unless I died, I said, my voice low and steady, I would never allow it. I met his eyes, each word I spoke a shard of glass. Go ahead and try. The standoff was broken by a nurse entering, her expression stern. Visiting hours are over. The patient needs rest. They left in a cloud of fury and failed manipulation. The silence they left behind was deafening. Sure enough, once I was discharged a few days later, my father didn't go back on his word. He moved with a swift, brutal efficiency. The news hit the business blogs before I'd even unpacked my hospital bag. Serafina, a D-list actress no one cared about, suddenly descended from the clouds to become the new CEO of Ethereum Group. The press release was a masterpiece of fiction, touting her fresh perspective and modern vision. The accompanying photo showed her sitting in my mother's chair, behind my mother's desk, a simpering smile on her face. And I was reduced to her assistant. A bitter, public comedy designed to humiliate me and solidify her position. On her very first day, I walked into what had been my office. Serafina was already there, of course. She'd been busy. The framed photo of my mother and me that had sat on the desk for years was gone. I saw it peeking out from the trash bin next to the desk. She followed my gaze and sneered. "You were right. Trash belongs in the trash." A cold stillness settled over me. I walked over to the bin, reached in and retrieved the photo. I wiped the dust from the glass with my sleeve, my touch gentle on my mother's smiling face. "Mom," I whispered, too low for her to hear. "Don't worry. I won't let a single one of them off. I'll drag them all into hell and then you can come back and claim every debt they owe you." I lifted my head and looked directly at Serafina, who was watching me with a smirk of superiority. "Serafina," I said, my voice even. "How's your mother doing in prison? I'm really curious. Ever since she was arrested, you haven't once gone to see her. So much for family." Her smirk didn't falter. "Sister, my mother will be released in just a few months. But you," she said, her voice dripping with faux pity, "you'll never sit in the CEO's chair again." She leaned forward, her eyes glinting with malice. "Tell me, if your late mother could see from the underworld that her company had fallen into the hands of a murderer like you, how would she feel?" She let the word hang in the air. Murderer. She was trying to get a rise out of me to make me react. I remained still. "You know," she continued, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, "if you'd come back a little earlier, Diana might still be alive. But there are no ifs in this world." I still remember how she knelt on the floor, begging me for mercy. A cruel, distant look entered her eyes. She looked so beautiful in that moment, but she didn't understand. Only in her death could I finally take my rightful place as the Hart family's eldest daughter. The sound was even sharper than it had been in the hospital. My palm connected with her face with a force that snapped her head to the side. At first, I had thought letting her experience the slow, humiliating fall from a false glory would be sweeter revenge. But now I realized there was no need. Staying even a moment longer in this filth, playing her pathetic games, would be a betrayal to my mother. She staggered back, her hand flying to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock and rage. "You dare hit me? What right do you have? You're nothing but a bastard without a mother. You should have died long ago along with that short-lived mother of yours." I didn't bother answering. Instead, I raised my hand and slapped her again across the other cheek in quick succession. Her face began to swell red and lumpy like a pig's head. Looking down at her cowering form, my voice was cold as steel. "You're not dead yet, so why would I be in a hurry? Don't worry, Serafina. I'll make sure you don't die easily." I stepped past her, leaving her sputtering on the floor, and walked straight out of the office. It was time to stop playing the victim. It was time to show them what a real CEO looked like. I walked directly toward the main boardroom. The quarterly shareholders meeting was about to start. My father had blatantly overstepped the board of directors to appoint his darling daughter as CEO, a clear violation of company bylaws. But he was counting on shock, on inertia, on the shareholders' reluctance to cause a scene. He hadn't counted on me bringing a gift. I pushed the double doors open. Every head in the room turned. My father sat at the head of the long mahogany table, in the chair that had been my mother's. His face hardened into a mask of contempt the moment he saw me. "Ilara," he boomed, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent room. "You're just a secretary now. What right do you have to attend a shareholders' meeting?" Before I could even speak, the man I had entered with, my lawyer, a tall, severe man named Mr. Sterling, stepped forward. He placed a single leather-bound folder on the table in front of my father and opened it. I smiled, calm yet cutting. "So," I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the room, "do I have the qualifications now?" My father's eyes scanned the document. It was a share transfer agreement. Over the past few years, using every resource I had been quietly acquiring Ethereum stock. I had bought out smaller shareholders, leveraged my own assets, and called in every favor owed to my mother. The document showed that I now held 45% of the company's shares. My father's face drained of color, turning half pale, half flushed with apoplectic rage. He owned a mere 20%. The other shareholders owned the rest. I believe, I said, my voice dripping with icy politeness, that this seat belongs to me. His anger was so great it looked as if his tie might strangle him. Elara, no matter what, I'm still your father. At that moment the doors opened again. Serafina stumbled in, her face still swollen and red from my slaps, doing her best to look weak and victimized. Sister, she whined, her voice faint. I know you're angry at Dad, but he only did all this for your own good. A woman can't possibly manage a company. Seeing her like that, my father's paternal instincts overrode his business sense. He rushed to her side, supporting her tenderly, his eyes full of a pity he had never once shown me. I couldn't care less that he had just been sitting in that chair. I walked over and sat down, brushing the seat off as if it were filthy. That position rightfully belonged to the throne of my mother's empire. I addressed the room, my voice even and commanding. I wonder if the shareholders have any opinions about the recent personnel decisions regarding the CEO position. My father glared at me. Elara, this is family business. Why drag it into the company? When I said nothing, he quickly changed his tone, trying to appeal to the room. Serafina studied abroad. She has a modern vision. But you, Elara, you haven't even graduated from college yet. How could you possibly run a corporation? I only did this for the good of the company. He turned his condescending gaze back to me. You're just a girl. What if someone deceives you? How could I face your mother in the afterlife? I fixed him with an icy stare that made several shareholders shift uncomfortably in their seats. The person least qualified to speak of my mother is you. You aren't worthy. I let the accusation hang in the air. Or are you afraid I'll meet the same kind of scum you are? I swept my gaze across the table. And what if I'm a woman? My mother built an empire with nothing but her own 2 hands. In what way was she inferior to any man? If anything, she was far stronger than most men who only carry the name. Serafina clenched her teeth, cutting in. Sister, how can you talk about Dad like that? Yes, the company was founded by your mother, but she's been dead for years. Without Dad, it would have collapsed long ago. She gestured dismissively. So, what if you hold a few shares? They're nothing but scraps of paper. You should be grateful he raised you at all, not turning around now to hurt him like this. My father pressed a hand to his chest, panting with fury. Pointing a shaking finger at me, he shouted, If you were even half as sensible as Serafina, how could I ever reject you? I almost laughed out loud. The hypocrisy was staggering. People were fragile. That much I knew. I'd once had someone who protected me unconditionally. But because of these people I lost her forever. I looked at the faces around the table. They were calculating, reassessing. The power in the room had just visibly shifted. The game was now being played on my board. And I had just taken control of the center. The boardroom air, once thick with my father's bluster and Serafina's performative weakness, was now charged with a new, calculating energy. The shareholders' eyes, previously fixed on Alistair Hart, were now darting between him and me, reassessing the balance of power. My 45% was a fact, a seismic shift they hadn't anticipated. Scraps of paper indeed. My father, Alistair, was still sputtering, his face a mottled canvas of rage and humiliation. This is an outrage. A hostile takeover within my own family. It's not a takeover, father, I said, my voice cool and measured, a stark contrast to his spluttering. It's a correction. A return to the company's rightful governance. I let my gaze sweep over the assembled men and women. My mother, Leora Hart, built Ethereum from nothing. She valued innovation, integrity and strength. Not nepotism. I didn't look at Serafina, but the word hung in the air, pointing directly at her. Serafina, sensing the tide turning, tried another tactic. She softened her voice, layering on a syrupy tone of reconciliation. Sister, we're siblings. Even if from different mothers, we share the same blood. She took a tentative step toward the table, playing to the room. You may not trust outsiders, but you should trust me. I only want to help. This company belongs to both of us. I just don't want to see it die young. She deliberately emphasized those last 2 words, die young, twisting them into a knife aimed straight at my heart. A not-so-subtle reminder of my mother's early death. Of course, I understood her meaning. She was reminding everyone in the room that I was the daughter of the dead woman, the ghost at the feast, while she was the vibrant, living heir. I let the silence stretch, letting her words hang there, allowing the shareholders to absorb the cheap manipulation. Then I looked her straight in the eye, my voice steady, each word a precise, needle-sharp puncture to her carefully constructed reality. Half-siblings, I said, tilting my head as if puzzled. Serafina, you're only 3 months younger than me. I paused, letting the math sink in for everyone present. And I clearly remember your mother, Diana, married into the Hart family when I was already 7 years old. The air left the room. This was a known fact, but one never ever spoken of in polite company, and certainly not in a boardroom. It was the family's dirty little secret, the elephant in every room we had ever shared. As expected, both their faces turned ashen. Serafina's mask of sisterly concern shattered into one of pure panic. My father whipped his head toward me, his eyes bulging with a mixture of terror and fury. "Elara," he thundered, his voice shaking. "Dirty laundry should never be aired in public. This is not the place." I laughed lightly, the sound unnervingly calm. "You're right, father. This isn't about laundry. It's about truth." I turned to Mr. Sterling, my lawyer, who had remained silent by the door. "And the truth has a certain legal weight, doesn't it?" Mr. Sterling stepped forward again. This time he didn't place a single folder on the table. He placed 3. He opened the top one, revealing a stack of DNA test results that had been prepared and verified weeks in advance, waiting for this exact moment. These documents, Mr. Sterling's voice was dry and precise, detail paternity tests conducted by 3 independent, accredited laboratories. The results are unanimous and conclusive. He didn't need to say more. The conclusion was written in the stark clinical language of science on the front page of each report. Serafina stared blankly at the stacks of paper, her mouth slightly agape. Her voice, when it came, was a trembling, reedy thing. "Sister," she whispered, her eyes welling with fresh, convincing tears. "Do you hate me that much? To the point of faking a DNA test?" She turned her pleading gaze to our father. "Dad, she's lying. You can't believe this. Remember the fake video she played at the wedding? Isn't that proof enough of what she's capable of?" But my father wasn't listening to her. He was staring fixedly at the top report in his hands, his knuckles white as he gripped the paper. He looked like a man watching his entire world dissolve. "No," he muttered, his voice barely audible. He flipped through the pages, then another report, then the third. No matter how many times he read it, the truth remained the same. The words were a death knell to his legacy. "Vanessa," he growled, his voice low and dangerous, the name sounding foreign and wrong on his tongue. We'll go to another lab. Another test." Serafina froze, her gaze shattering. The use of her real name, the name she'd had before her mother married my father, was a rejection in itself. "Dad, I am your daughter. This is a trap Elara set up. How could you do this to me, sister?" Her voice rose in pitch, bordering on hysteria. "No matter how many tests, the truth won't change. I am Dad's daughter." She was acting so well, it was like watching a clown on stage, her performance becoming more desperate as the audience turned against her. I didn't bother replying. The evidence was irrefutable. No matter how many tests were run, the result would never change. The foundation of her entire life, of her identity as a Hart, was sand. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. Shareholders began murmuring urgently among themselves. My father, looking 20 years older, grabbed a sobbing Serafina by the arm and practically dragged her from the room, unable to face the silent, judging stares. I remained seated at the head of the table, the quiet settling around me like a mantle. The battle for control of Ethereum was won. The war, however, was just beginning. After they had gone, one of the older shareholders, a man named Mr. Evans, who had been a loyal ally of my mother's, lingered behind. He approached me, his expression grim. "Elara," he said quietly, pulling a small USB drive from his pocket and discreetly sliding it across the table to me. "I believe you should see this. It was flagged by our internal security. Seems the new CEO was rather liberal with the company's confidential information." I picked up the drive, its weight negligible but its potential immense. "Thank you, Mr. Evans. Your mother was a great woman," he said simply, then turned and left. Back in my office now officially, I plugged the drive into my laptop. Inside was a single video file. It showed Serafina sitting at her computer in the CEO's office, screen sharing with someone on a video call. The someone was Liam. And the final bid price for the Sterling account is locked in at $4.3 million, Serafina was saying, a proud smile on her face. They think we're coming in at 5. With your bid just under theirs, you're guaranteed to win the contract. Daddy will be so impressed with you, my love. I leaned back in my chair, a cold smile touching my lips. I hadn't expected her to be so stupid, so blindly lovesick, as to hand over Ethereum's core bid price to a direct competitor. She had committed a blatant, prosecutable crime, leaking trade secrets. Maybe she and her mother would be reunited sooner than she thought. But even the thought of them sharing a prison cell felt too light, too simple, compared to the cold, intricate hatred burning inside me. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was Liam. He demanded to meet me in the company lobby. The arrogance, even in his diminished state, was astounding. I found him pacing near the reception desk, his usual polish replaced by a frayed, desperate energy. He thrust a USB drive at me the moment he saw me. It was a cheap, pathetic mirror of the one now sitting in my laptop. "Don't you want a copy?" he asked, his voice strained. "Of our memories?" I didn't take it. "I don't," I answered coldly. The truth was, I didn't care whether those videos were leaked or not. Their power to shame me had died the moment he'd chosen Serafina. At worst, their release would just be another charge to add to his eventual downfall. I glanced at my watch. "You have 10 minutes, Liam. Make them count." His tone softened, adopting the pleading cadence of the high school boy who used to bring me breakfast, trying to tap into a nostalgia that no longer existed. "Elara, can't you forgive Diana and Serafina? What happened was a mistake. A terrible mistake." "No," I said flatly. The false tenderness in his eyes broke apart instantly, replaced by raw anger. He nearly grabbed my wrist, his voice turning rough. "Elara, don't push it too far. I already gave you a chance." He was repeating his threats, but they sounded hollow now. "Serafina said it herself. Ethereum was your mother's life's work. Do you really want to see it collapse? Just sign the waiver. Post an apology to Serafina and I'll let Ethereum go. Otherwise," he puffed out his chest, trying to summon the ghost of his former power, "the Croft group will officially cut ties. You know exactly how much influence we have. Once we make that announcement, do you think any other company will dare cooperate with Ethereum?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound echoed in the marble-lined lobby. "You'll let Ethereum go? How magnanimous." I took a step closer, my voice dropping. "I'll admit years ago Croft Group had power enough to make me cautious. But that was because of your mother, Evelyn. A truly brilliant woman." I saw him flinch at the mention of his mother, a woman he could never hope to emulate. "And now," I continued, "these past years, who do you think handled all of Croft Group's affairs for you? Who negotiated the contracts? Who smoothed over your mistakes with clients? Who stayed up night after night fixing the messes you created? Internally, your company is in no better shape than Ethereum. That castle of yours is already crumbling." I met his stunned gaze, my eyes cold. "Winter is here, Liam. The Croft Group is on the verge of collapse and you're too blind to see it." Our conversation ended poorly. He left in a fury of impotent rage. That very night, true to his word, Liam issued an official statement from Croft Enterprises. They were severing all ties with Ethereum Group. But what he didn't know, what his arrogance blinded him to, was that every single business connection he was relying on was mine. Every relationship, every client loyalty had been won by me. I had been the one drinking until I collapsed at banquets, the one landing in the ACU from exhaustion, the one who remembered the names of every executive's children. Those partners were loyal to me, never to him. But it wasn't yet time to reveal all the cards in my hand. Let him swagger a little longer. Let him believe his own press releases. Let him hang himself with the rope I was so generously providing. So I wasn't surprised when, a day later, I saw my father waiting outside my apartment building. In just 48 hours he looked as if he had aged a decade. His shoulders were slumped, and the arrogant bluster was gone, replaced by a strange, almost gentle desperation. "Elara," he muttered as I approached, trailing after me like a lost puppy. "This neighborhood, it isn't safe. Why don't you move back home? Don't worry, Serafina is married into the Croft family now. She won't be around much." He attempted a weak, conciliatory smile. "If you don't like the old house, I'll buy another. A penthouse. Whatever you want." I had never seen him so pitiful. It was almost laughable. This was the man who had stolen my mother's company and let her memory be erased. I stopped and turned to face him, my expression impassive. "Let's talk about the DNA test," I said calmly. It wasn't because I wanted to mend some broken father-daughter bond. He had stolen the only family I'd ever had, and I only wanted him to know in no uncertain terms that the daughter he'd cherished all these years, the one he'd betrayed me for, was never his by blood. But it seemed that from beginning to end he was nothing but cold-blooded. His concern wasn't for me, it was for his own shattered ego and the ruin of his legacy. Fine. If he couldn't feel the pain of betrayal, I would find another way to make him pay. Perhaps when Ethereum was publicly listed and he lost all his power and money. Or perhaps with that cheap little life of his. "Ilara, can I come in and sit for a while?" he asked, his voice pleading. I looked at him, this broken, pathetic man who had caused so much pain, and I simply turned, unlocked my door and stepped inside. I slammed the door in his face without a word. He was humiliated, I could feel it through the wood. But he didn't get angry. He didn't pound on the door. I heard a soft rustling and then his footsteps retreating down the hall. When I opened the door an hour later, a small paper bag sat on the welcome mat. Inside was a bundle of ripe mangoes. A peace offering. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed in the empty hallway. He had lived with me for more than 20 years and still didn't know I was deathly allergic to mangoes. Truly the best father in the world. I picked up the bag, carried it to the kitchen trash chute and let it fall. The fruit of his ignorance disappeared into the darkness below. The next morning I arrived at Ethereum to find the air thick with a different kind of tension. It was the acrid smell of fear and panic. With Croft Group very publicly turning its back on us, clients were dropping like flies. Emails piled up with subject lines like contract termination and suspension of services. Mistakes were multiplying in our work as morale plummeted. Debts were mounting with no clear way to recover them. Even my father, stripped of his chairman's title but still lurking around, was secretly trying to dump his Ethereum shares on the down low, desperate to salvage some cash before the entire ship went down. Rumors spread through the office like wildfire. Ethereum might be at its end. And then, like vultures circling a dying animal, they showed up. Liam strode into the main office with Serafina clinging to his arm. She looked thinner, more fragile, her eyes hollowed out. The DNA revelation had clearly taken its toll. She was playing the battered victim to perfection. "Sister," she said, her voice a fragile whisper as she approached my desk. "Thank you for telling me I'm not Dad's biological daughter." She offered a weak, tragic smile. I was so naive, living in an illusion all this time. But I still believe that the love of raising a child cannot be forgotten. Dad will always be my dad. She was laying it on thick, her words dripping with a manipulative meaning only I could fully decipher. "But anyway, congratulations, sister. You finally have a father who loves only you. I truly hope you're satisfied." Liam pulled her into his arms, his gaze tender and protective. "It's okay, Vanessa. From now on I'll be your father and your mother too." Watching the two of them act so sickeningly sweet hand in hand nearly made me gag. Their performance was for an audience of one, me. They wanted to show me their unbreakable bond, their shared victimhood at my hands. "If President Croft has no urgent business," I said, not looking up from my computer screen. "Excuse me, I'm very busy." "Stop right there." Liam's voice barked across the office, harsh and commanding. The few employees still at their desks flinched. "Ilara, I demand you apologize to Serafina. If not, you'll watch Ethereum collapse today." "I'll make sure of it." Serafina looked up at him with starry-eyed admiration. "Liam, that's not very nice. After all, Ethereum was once the company my father put his whole heart into." I couldn't stomach it anymore. I sneered, finally looking at them. "Serafina, how naive can you be? Since when has that so-called father of yours ever truly been on your side? He's dumping his shares as we speak. That company is doomed anyway." I laughed openly without restraint. "Yes, Croft Group. It's about time it fell apart, don't you think?" Vanessa, I could no longer think of her as Serafina, gently pushed his hand away. "Liam, let me speak with my sister privately." Before leaving, he glared at me, spitting out each word like a threat. "Ilara, if you dare lay a finger on Vanessa, I'll make sure you suffer a fate worse than death." As soon as the door to my office shut, Vanessa's expression twisted. The fragile victim vanished, replaced by a visage of pure, venomous hatred. Her voice when she spoke was a low, vicious snarl. "Sister," she hissed. "So what if you want our father? The man you love only ever loves me." She took a step closer, her eyes glinting with malice. "I have Croft Group behind me. What do you have? Nothing but loneliness and empty hands. You're the real loser." She smiled, a cruel, ugly thing. "If you kneel down and lick my shoes, maybe I'll even consider saying a few words to Liam so you can die a little more peacefully." She was trying to provoke me to get a reaction. I remained still, letting her talk. "You know that little cat you loved so much? Snowball," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I killed it. I put antifreeze in its milk. Just like I killed your mother's reputation. And the company she left behind." She let out a low laugh. "I'll destroy that too. Isn't it fun?" She leaned in, her breath hot on my face. "Do you really think Dad loves you? He only cherishes you because you're the only blood child he has left. Once he has another, and trust me, he will, do you really think he'll care about you?" She was spiraling, revealing the rotten core of her being, convinced of her own invincibility. "A wise person knows when to bend. Your only choice now is to kneel and beg me, just like your mother knelt at my feet." Her words were a surreal, horrifying confession. She was so proud, so utterly consumed by her own evil. "Then," she continued, her eyes taking on a distant, remembering look, "Diana was only a few steps from the life-saving medicine, but she still tried. Just a little closer and she could have grabbed it." A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. "But I didn't let her. I kicked the bottle of medicine away." I still remember her face twisted in horror, her trembling voice begging. She looked back at me, her expression one of mock sympathy. "If only I could have recorded it for you, sister. You must miss your mother so much." I watched her, this creature drowning in her own sick pride. Every word she spoke was a nail in her own coffin, a confession that could end her life behind bars. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just absorbed it all, storing every vile syllable away. When she finally finished, spent from her own vitriol, I smiled. It was a cold, dead smile that made her blink in confusion. "Winter is coming, Vanessa," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The Croft Group should collapse now." She sneered with contempt, trying to regain her footing. "What is this, a soap opera? You really think a woman like you could stir up storms? Don't you get it? From the start, Liam's approach to you was part of my plan. I wanted everything you loved to disappear into my hands." Her voice rose, becoming shrill. "Why were you born the precious Alara while I had to follow my mother, hiding and running everywhere? Why?" I didn't care about her hysterics. I didn't care about her grievances. All I knew was that I would drag her down into hell with my own hands. All these years of patience had been for this very moment. For a long time now, Vanessa had lost any right to sit at the same chessboard as me. She was a chaotic, stupid pawn, and I was about to sweep her from the board. With just one move of my finger, the partners who once cooperated with the Croft Group turned their backs and sided with me. In business, there are no eternal bonds, only eternal interests. I could give them more, offer them a brighter future. I had the contracts, the vision, the stability they craved. In a matter of days, the news reports started to change. Croft Group's cash flow was severed. The weaknesses I had planted over the years, the time bombs I'd built into their systems while I was helping Liam run his company, began to detonate. He was too arrogant, too blind with self-satisfaction, ignoring every warning from his own risk management team, trusting only his own crumbling instincts. Clearly they were never my match. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office, gently swirling a glass of rich red wine. I didn't drink it. I looked out over the city my mother had loved, then turned and poured the wine onto the polished floor in a slow, deliberate stream. A libation. A offering. Sunlight slanted across the tiles, catching the deep red liquid, and I smiled. "Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "Do you see? I will make Ethereum soar high. I'll make sure everyone remembers your name forever." The next morning, the headline shot straight to the top of every news feed and hot search list. Croft Enterprises files for bankruptcy. The collapse didn't just drag them down. It took Vanessa with them. The news of Croft Enterprises' bankruptcy was a thunderclap that shook the city. Headlines screamed from every screen. Financial analysts dissected the shocking, rapid downfall on live TV. and the social media feeds of everyone associated with the company were flooded with a mix of schadenfreude and genuine shock. The golden boy had not just fallen. His entire gilded world had evaporated into dust and debt. And with the collapse of Croft Group, the flimsy platform from which Vanessa had launched her pathetic acting career vanished. She had been nothing more than a forgotten D-lister, a footnote in the entertainment world, only clinging to relevance by her association with the Croft name and fortune. With their backing, she had somehow secured a significant investment into a major film project, a historical epic, and had even schemed her way into the lead role through a combination of backdoor deals and Liam's influence. The media, always fickle, had already started a heavy promotional campaign, touting her as the destined female lead, the fresh face who would carry the blockbuster. Overnight it all turned to ash. The funding from Croft Enterprises was gone. The production company, fearing the toxic association, immediately cut ties. The press releases were cold and corporate. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the role of Lady Arabella will be recast. Vanessa lost the role. The internet, which had once mocked her, now turned its full, vicious glee upon her. Memes of her red carpet fall were edited to show her tumbling into a bankruptcy court. She was ridiculed, mocked, and torn apart. Of course, she didn't take it lying down. A creature of habit and desperation, she wanted to recycle the same old trick. Find a powerful man to latch onto. And a show like this could never lack an audience, especially when I was the one selling the tickets. I knew her patterns. I knew her desperation. I knew the kind of men who frequented the hotels she could still afford. It was time to give Liam a front row seat to the real woman he had married. I invited Liam to a meeting at the Opal Suite, a notoriously discreet and expensive hotel known for its clientele of wealthy older men and their young companions. The pretext was thin but plausible, discussing a potential fire sale acquisition of some of Croft's remaining assets by Ethereum. At this point, drowning in ruin and desperation, what right did he have to refuse? He could only drag himself there like a beggar being forced to perform. I was waiting in the lobby when he arrived. He looked hollowed out, his expensive suit looking borrowed and wrinkled, the arrogance finally beaten out of him by financial reality. "Elara," he said, his voice weary. "I never thought you'd be such a shameless woman. I already have a wife I love dearly. Please have some self-respect, dragging me to a hotel like this." I didn't answer. I simply raised a finger to my lips, shushing him, and turned toward the elevators. He frowned, confused, but followed me, his pride too bruised to do anything else. That didn't stop his poisonous mouth. "Anna, Elara," he corrected himself, the old name a slip that revealed his agitated state. "Can't you stop being so cheap? What is this, some pathetic attempt to seduce me? Don't you feel any shame?" But his words were cut short. Not because he suddenly came to his senses, but because he heard a voice. A voice so familiar it cut through the hotel's hushed atmosphere and made his skin crawl. Vanessa. Her voice was followed by a man's laughter, low, greasy, and unmistakably lecherous. It was coming from a semi-private balcony lounge that overlooked the lobby, its curtains only partially drawn. Liam's steps faltered. Then he started moving again, striding faster and faster as he got closer to the source of the sound. The patrons sipping tea in the lobby glanced up, sensing the sudden tension. We reached the arched entrance to the balcony lounge. The scene inside was illuminated by the soft glow of lamp lights. Vanessa was there, draped over a bloated older man with a shiny, bald head and a suit that strained at its seams. His hand was possessively on her thigh. Glasses of champagne sat on the table between them. Vanessa's moans grew louder as we approached, theatrical and breathy. Then her eyes, scanning the room as part of her performance, met Liam's across the railing. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic flashed across her face. Her patron, however, a man with twisted tastes who loved playing dangerous games, only grew more excited by the intrusion, by the risk of being discovered. He pulled her closer. She could only stare helplessly, forced to meet the hateful, disbelieving glare of the man who had once loved her with all his heart, who had bankrupted his family's company for her. Liam couldn't take it anymore. A guttural roar erupted from him. He lunged forward, crashing through the low railing that separated the lounge from the walkway. He grabbed the bloated man by his lapels, hauling him out of his seat and grappling with him. The man, though big, was nothing but soft fat. He roared in fury, cursing at Vanessa even as he struggled against Liam's younger, leaner strength. You stupid girl. Do you still want to keep your role or not? Get him off me. Vanessa's eyes filled with a hatred I recognized. It was the same look she'd given me 1,000 times. She saw her meal ticket, her last chance at a role, being threatened. She saw Liam, broke and powerless as the obstacle. She snatched up a half-full bottle of champagne from the ice bucket. Without a second's hesitation, she smashed it against the back of Liam's head. The sound was a sickening thwack of glass on skull. "Liam, I'm sorry," she screamed, her voice shrill. "If you can't give me what I want, then don't blame me." Liam staggered, his grip loosening. Red wine mixed with blood dripped down his hair and onto his collar. The patron, seizing his chance, shoved Liam off him. Enraged and humiliated, the older man began pounding on Liam relentlessly with his meaty fists. Through it all, I stood calmly to the side, my phone held steady. I recorded every second. The chaotic fight, Vanessa's betrayal, the brutal violence. It was all so sweet, so perfectly damning. When security finally swarmed in to break up the brawl, I stopped recording. I quietly sent the video to 3 different paparazzi tip lines before even leaving the hotel. That night the internet exploded. The narrative was too delicious. From Vanessa being exposed as a gold-digging mistress, to Croft's bankruptcy, to the chaotic hotel brawl of 3 people, every sordid detail drove the public into a frenzy. The video was everywhere. Liam this time had hit an immovable wall. The patron, a man with his own reputation to protect, pressed charges. Assault. Liam spent the next few days in the hospital and upon his release, was immediately preparing to face real prison time. Vanessa was a little luckier, but only because I had cut out the part where she smashed the bottle from the video I released. Kept that clip for myself. Still, her scandal with the patron was undeniable. Combined with the footage from the wedding, her reputation was in permanent shreds. The press said she couldn't even step off a plane at a private airport without being mobbed by photographers, their flashes highlighting her frantic, panicked face. She was forced to flee, a pariah with nowhere to go but the one place she thought she'd never have to return to, the Hart family estate. But I was already there waiting. I stood in the grand, cold living room of my childhood home, a place that held no happy memories for me. I turned an old, expired bottle of heart medicine over in my hands. The label was worn and blurred with age. It had been my mother's. I'd found it tucked away in the back of a bathroom cabinet years ago, a relic Diana had missed in her purge. The butler, an old man who had served my mother and now served my father with a quiet disapproval, entered nervously. "Miss Alara," he said, his voice low. "Miss Vanessa has returned." I waved him off without looking at him. "Leave us." It was time. Time to meet my dear little sister again. The front door opened and Vanessa stumbled in. She looked half mad, her hair a mess, her clothes disheveled. The glamorous actress was gone, replaced by a desperate, haunted creature. The moment her eyes scanned the dimly lit room and landed on me, standing calmly by the fireplace, her face drained of all remaining color. Terror-stricken, she stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth as if she were seeing a ghost. "Leora," she gasped, the name a choked whisper. You're supposed to be dead." My mother's name. The shock of hearing it from her lips, the raw fear in her voice, it was everything. She was so deep in her guilt and panic that she was mistaking me for the woman she had helped kill. I didn't bother to check whether she was truly insane or only pretending. It didn't matter. I moved toward her, my steps silent on the Persian rug. She tried to back away but she hit the wall. I gripped her chin, forcing her mouth open. Her eyes were wide, rolling with fear. I shoved the expired pills into her mouth one by one. They were chalky and bitter. She struggled, gagging, trying to spit them out, her nails scratching at my arms. I clamped her mouth shut with my other hand, coldly, relentlessly. "Swallow," I commanded, my voice devoid of all emotion. Years ago she had denied my mother medicine. Now I would force her to swallow it all. Only after making sure she had gulped them down, her throat convulsing, did I release her. I wiped my fingers on my trousers with disgust. She collapsed to her knees, clawing at her throat, desperate to vomit to expel the poison. I didn't give her the chance. I seized a handful of her hair and smashed her head against the polished wooden floor. Once. Not enough to cause serious damage but enough to stun her, to show her who was in control. Then I pulled out my phone. On the screen was a different video. This one showed Diana in prison. She was in a common area being jostled by another inmate, looking haggard and afraid. The footage was grainy, taken from a security feed Mr. Sterling had acquired. The cruel mastermind behind her discomfort wasn't me. It was just the brutal reality of the system she was in. But that didn't matter. The effect was what I needed. I held the screen in front of Vanessa's bleary, tear-filled eyes. "Look," I whispered. "Look what's happening to your mother. And you're not there to help her." Vanessa collapsed fully to her knees, snot and tears streaming down her face as she kowtowed, her forehead touching the floor. "Sister. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. I beg you. I'll do anything." I pressed the sole of my shoe against her trembling fingers, pinning them to the floor. "My good sister," I said, my voice soft and deadly. "The day my mother knelt and begged you, you didn't help her, did you?" Her eyes bulged in terror. She tried to scramble away, but my weight held her fast. I chuckled, the sound cold and empty in the large room. "What's there to be afraid of? It's not time yet." And so I kept her. For 10 days I installed myself in the house I now owned through my majority shareholding. Another fact that sent my father fleeing to a hotel. I kept Vanessa there, a prisoner in her own gilded cage. I didn't torture her physically beyond that first encounter. The psychological torment was far more effective. I'd play the video of Diana. I'd leave the empty medicine bottle on her bedside table. I'd have Mr. Sterling call with updates on Liam's impending sentencing. She unraveled day by day, her sanity stretching thinner and thinner. On the 10th day, Diana was released from prison. My father, still clinging to some twisted shred of affection for the woman who had shared his bed for 2 decades, personally drove a now terrified Vanessa to pick her up. It was a pathetic show of familial loyalty. But the rain that day was biblical, a torrential downpour that turned the roads into rivers. The car, my father's vintage sedan, sped along the coastal road toward the prison. And for some reason, a reason the mechanics would later call a catastrophic brake line failure, the brakes suddenly didn't work. The car, carrying my father, his mistress and his not daughter, plunged through the guardrail and straight into the churning storm-gray sea. Coincidentally, there was a Coast Guard patrol boat nearby, conducting drills in the weather. They saw the car go in and reacted with incredible speed. But in the end, only one person was pulled, sputtering and screaming, from the wreckage. That person was Vanessa. My father and Diana were found trapped inside, their bodies washed ashore days later. Sadly, the trauma of the accident, of watching her parents drown, of her own narrow escape, was too much for Vanessa's already fractured mind to bear. She emerged from the hospital irrevocably insane, screaming day and night that a woman named Leora was in the water, trying to pull her under, trying to kill her. The doctors called it PTSD. A tragic reaction to a terrible accident. I called it justice. As for everything that had happened within my family, I cannot say it didn't leave a mark. A cold, hollow space where emotion used to be. But the empire in my hands only grew larger, fueled by a relentless, cold drive. Ethereum didn't just recover, it metastasized. From a premier interior design and architecture firm, it expanded aggressively. I acquired a struggling but innovative auto repair chain and revolutionized it with technology. I bought a network of local swimming centers and turned them into luxury wellness hubs. It wasn't just business, it was a tribute. Ethereum became the leading enterprise in the region, a sprawling conglomerate that rose to rank among the top 100 strongest corporations in the world. My mother's name was in every business magazine, on every investor's lips. I stood in my new penthouse office, higher than my father had ever dreamed, and looked out at the city. "Mom," I whispered to the glass. "I've always been walking the path you once did. I want the whole world to remember you." A few years passed. The scandal faded from the headlines, replaced by newer tragedies and triumphs. Ethereum was my life, my monument. It was on a Tuesday, I think, when I unexpectedly ran into him. I was walking through the gleaming marble lobby of Ethereum headquarters, heading for a lunch meeting, when I saw a familiar figure sitting awkwardly on one of the plush benches. He looked smaller, diminished. His clothes were cheap, ill-fitting. It was Liam. He had just been released from prison. Perhaps life behind bars had worn away all the arrogance and pride he once had. He looked up, saw me, and got to his feet, his movements hesitant. "Elara," he asked, his voice rough from disuse. Can we talk for a moment?" I looked at him, this ghost from my past. I felt nothing. No anger, no hatred, not even pity. Just a blank curiosity. I led him to the expensive, minimalist cafe beneath the building, the same place where so many of our dates had happened years ago. Only now the scene and the people were no longer the same. He sat across from me, clutching a glass of water he didn't drink. "Ilara," he began, his eyes downcast. "I've thought a lot during my years. Inside. I finally realized it was Vanessa who seduced me. She manipulated me. The one I've loved from start to finish has always been you." I stared at him, utterly unmoved. "Can you forgive me?" he pleaded, his voice gaining a desperate energy. "I swear from now on I'll only ever love you. We can start over. Forget all of this." Hearing that, I couldn't help it. A low, genuine laugh escaped me. Was that all prison had taught him? How to spin delusional romantic fantasies. "Liam," I said, my voice calm and clear. Ilara never loved you. Not once. Not for a single second." The truth, finally spoken aloud, seemed to physically wound him. He flinched. Then, to my utter astonishment, he slid off his chair and dropped to his knees on the cafe floor. He started slapping himself across the face, hard enough to leave red marks. Tears streamed down his cheeks. "Ilara, I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. Back then I was young, easy to tempt, and it was Vanessa who came to me first. It's normal for men to be weak, but for you I can change everything. I can be better." I only shook my head, watching his pathetic display with a strange, detached calm. This man must truly have gone insane. The Liam I knew would never have debased himself like this. Prison had broken him completely. "Goodbye, Liam," I said, standing up. I left him there on his knees, sobbing in the middle of the chic cafe, a spectacle for the lunchtime crowd. A month later, I had business that took me to the outskirts of the city, to the state-of-the-art psychiatric hospital that Ethereum had funded as part of its corporate outreach program. It was a pet project of mine. The director, a sleek man in a white coat, greeted me with obsequious respect. "Hello, CEO Hart. A pleasure to have you visit. We've just received a new batch of treatment equipment from overseas. Very advanced. Electroconvulsive therapy modules. Would you like to see a demonstration?" I nodded, allowing him to lead me through the serene, brightly lit wards toward the secure wing. We stepped out into an enclosed courtyard. And there they were. A sight both pitiful and absurd, a perfect tableau of cosmic justice. Vanessa, her hair lank and unwashed, was clutching a ragged doll to her chest. She was chasing after a man who was shuffling in circles, muttering to himself. The man was Liam. "Daddy!" Vanessa screeched, her voice cracked and broken. "Daddy, don't leave me. Don't let the water get me." Meanwhile, Liam muttered with a dazed, vacant expression, "I'm not sick. I'm really not sick. The numbers are wrong. The contracts are all wrong." He was still trapped in his business failures, his mind unable to escape the ruin he had caused. But then again, when has anyone in a mental asylum ever admitted they were crazy? The director watched them with a clinical eye. A tragic case. Shared psychosis, perhaps exacerbated by trauma. They were assigned to the same ward for familiarity. It seems to have cemented their bond. I curled my lips into a slow, cold smile and glanced at the two people who had once trampled over my life, who had taken everything from me with their selfishness and cruelty. They were now living in their own personal hell, a prison of their own making, forever trapped together. "Very well," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. I turned to the director. "Use those two for your demonstration." The director blinked, momentarily taken aback, before a professional mask slid back into place. "Ma'am." I kept my eyes on Liam and Vanessa, on their pathetic, endless dance of madness. "Their madness," I said, the words final and absolute, "is nothing short of textbook." The director's name was Dr. Evans, a man with the polished, unassuming demeanor of someone who had made a career out of agreeing with wealth and power. His momentary surprise at my suggestion melted away into seamless compliance. "Of course, CEO Hart. A practical demonstration. Right this way." He led me not back into the main building, but down a covered walkway to a newer, more sterile-looking annex. The air here smelled different, of antiseptic and something metallic like ozone after a storm. The doors were heavier, with keycard access and small, reinforced windows. "Our new treatment wing," Dr. Evans explained, swiping his card. We focus on treatment-resistant cases here. The equipment is truly cutting edge. The room we entered was a chilling blend of a doctor's office and a laboratory. One wall was dominated by a large observation window looking into a stark, white-tiled room. In the center of that room stood a machine that looked like a sinister dental chair crossed with a modern art sculpture. Smooth white plastic, adjustable restraints, and a cluster of electrodes on a mechanical arm. My stomach tightened, but my face remained a placid mask. This was the culmination. This was the end of the road they had chosen. The new ECT modules allow for unprecedented precision, Dr. Evans was saying, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. We can target specific neural pathways with minimal collateral memory loss. It's a far cry from the crude methods of the past. Through the window, I saw two orderlies lead Liam and Vanessa into the white room. They were docile, confused. Vanessa clutched her ragged doll, her eyes wide and vacant. Liam was muttering, his head down, tracing patterns on the floor with his toe. They didn't seem to understand where they were or what was about to happen. Are they consenting? I asked, my voice cool and professional. Dr. Evans gave a thin, dismissive smile. They are under a court-ordered commitment, CO Hart. Their consent is managed by the state. And their closest living relative, that would be you, has power of attorney over their care. He didn't need to elaborate. We both knew how that had been arranged. The orderlies were gentle but firm, guiding Liam into the chair first. He went without resistance, his muttering ceasing as he looked up at the array of electrodes with a childlike curiosity. The restraints were fastened, soft leather cuffs on his wrists and ankles, a strap across his chest. It was done with such clinical efficiency it was more horrifying than any violence. Vanessa watched from the corner, rocking slightly, her doll held tight. She didn't seem to recognize Liam or the chair or the danger. She was in her own world, a world of water and ghosts. A technician in scrubs entered the white room and began applying conductive gel to Liam's temples, then carefully positioning the electrodes. Dr. Evans picked up an intercom microphone. Proceed with the baseline calibration. Low frequency. A low, steady hum filled the observation room. On the other side of the glass, Liam's body gave a sudden, sharp jerk, like a fish on a line. His back arched against the restraints, his eyes rolling back in his head for a second before he slumped, dazed. A thin string of saliva dripped from his slack mouth. I didn't flinch. I watched, my hands clasped neatly in front of me. This was the man who had called me a leech. Who had promised to love me forever while plotting my humiliation. Who had held those videos over my head like a sword. The technician made an adjustment. Increasing to therapeutic levels, Dr. Evans said into the intercom, his voice devoid of emotion. The hum intensified. Liam's body seized again, a violent, uncontrolled tremor that shook the entire chair. A guttural, choking sound escaped his throat, a noise that wasn't quite human. It lasted for 5 seconds. 10. It felt like an eternity. Then it stopped. Liam went completely limp, his head lolling to the side. He was unconscious, breathing in ragged, shallow breaths. The orderlies unfastened him and moved him to a gurney, wheeling him out of the room. He looked smaller, broken, all the arrogance and pride finally, truly electrocuted out of him. Now it was Vanessa's turn. She didn't understand. As the orderlies approached her, she smiled, a vacant, trusting smile. Are we playing a game? She asked, her voice a little girl's whisper. They led her to the chair. She sat down willingly, still clutching her doll. For Leora, she murmured, stroking the doll's hair. The medicine is for Leora. The words, spoken in her madness, sent a cold shiver down my spine. Even now, even in her broken mind, my mother haunted her. The technician applied the gel. Vanessa giggled. That's cold. The restraints were fastened. She didn't struggle. She just looked at the electrodes descending toward her head with a kind of blank wonder. Begin, Dr. Evans said. The hum started. Vanessa's body gave its first jerk, and the giggle died in her throat. Her eyes, which had been vacant, suddenly sharpened with a bolt of pure animal terror. It was as if the electricity had momentarily jolted her back to sanity. He saw the machine. He saw the technicians. He saw me watching through the glass. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. Then the current fully took hold. Her seizure was different from Liam's. It was more violent, more desperate. She fought against the restraints, her back arching until it seemed it must snap. The ragged doll was crushed against her chest. The silent scream found its voice, a high, piercing shriek of absolute horror that was cut short as her jaw clamped shut, teeth grinding. She wasn't seeing the white room anymore. She was seeing whatever hell her mind had constructed. The water. Her. My mother's face. The current stopped. She collapsed, sobbing, incoherent, babbling about the water and the woman in the waves. The orderlies moved in to release her. I had seen enough. "Thank you for the demonstration, doctor," I said, my voice steady though my knees felt weak. "Your work here is invaluable." Dr. Evans beamed. "Thank you, CO Hart. We are proud to be supported by Ethereum." I left the asylum without looking back. The image of them in that chair, of the terror in Vanessa's eyes, was burned into my mind. It was supposed to feel like victory. It was supposed to feel like closure. It felt like ash. I threw myself into work. Ethereum continued to grow, to expand. We launched a new philanthropic arm, the Leora Hart Foundation, dedicated to funding medical research and supporting victims of financial abuse. The irony was not lost on me. I became a fixture in the society pages, the tragic, brilliant young CEO who had overcome unimaginable personal loss to build an empire in her mother's name. I was celebrated. I was admired. I was alone. The penthouse was silent. The only sounds were the hum of the climate control and the occasional chime of a notification on one of my many screens. I had everything I had ever wanted. I had revenge. I had power. I had security. And it meant nothing. One night, about a year after the demonstration, I found myself standing in front of a locked drawer in my home office. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were the ghosts of my past. With a key that felt foreign in my hand, I turned the lock. There were photo albums. Pictures of my mother, young and vibrant, holding a chubby-cheeked me. Pictures of us building sandcastles on a beach I barely remembered. There were report cards with her proud, looping signature. A dried corsage from a long-forgotten school dance. And at the very bottom, a small carved wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a ring. It wasn't the expensive engagement ring Liam had given me. This was simpler. A delicate silver band with a small, perfect emerald. My mother's ring. The one she'd worn every day of her life until the day she died. I slipped it on my finger. It fit perfectly. I looked around the penthouse at the breathtaking view of the city lights, at the evidence of my immense wealth and power. It was a beautiful cage. I had spent so long becoming the weapon, honing myself for the fight, that I had forgotten how to be a person. I had avenged my mother, but in doing so, I had entombed myself in the same cold marble crypt of hatred that had consumed her enemies. The phone on my desk buzzed. It was Dr. Evans. CO Hart. "A situation has arisen. Regarding patient Croft." I felt a familiar weariness. "What is it?" "He's been unresponsive for 2 days. Catatonic. We've run every test. There's no physiological cause. It's as if he's simply decided to leave." I arrived at the asylum within the hour. Liam was in a private room, lying in a hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. His eyes were open, but they saw nothing. He was breathing, his heart was beating, but Liam was gone. The last of him had been extinguished in that white room. I stood by his bed, looking down at the shell of the man who had once been the center of my universe. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sorrow. Just a vast, empty silence. Vanessa was in the room next door. They had put them close together, a final, cruel joke. Her door was ajar. I could hear her singing a soft, off-key nursery rhyme. I pushed the door open. She was sitting in a chair by the window, her doll in her arms. She looked up as I entered. For a moment, there was no recognition in her eyes. Then slowly a flicker. "Elara," she whispered. It was the first coherent word I'd heard from her in years. The electricity, or the proximity to Liam's final surrender, had somehow carved a tiny channel through the madness. She didn't look afraid. She looked tired. Deeply, profoundly tired. "He's gone, isn't he?" she said, her voice raspy from disuse. I nodded. She looked out the window at the high fence, at the sliver of sky. "I'm still here," she said, and it wasn't a question. It was a statement of a terrible, unending fact. I left her there, singing again to her doll. I walked out of the asylum into the cool evening air, and I didn't stop. I got in my car, but I didn't drive home. I drove without a destination, the city lights blurring past. I found myself on the other side of town in a neighborhood of quiet, modest houses. I parked outside one I hadn't seen in over a decade. The lights were on inside. I sat there for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I got out and walked to the door. I rang the bell. The door opened. Chloe, my best friend from university, stood there. She had a baby on her hip and a smear of pureed food on her shoulder. She looked older. Tired. Happy. Her eyes widened in shock. Elara. I hadn't seen her since the fallout. I'd pushed everyone away, too consumed by my mission. I started, but my voice failed me. The mask, the armor I had worn for so long, finally cracked. The weight of it all, the planning, the vengeance, the hollow victory, came crashing down on me all at once. Tears I didn't know I still had started to stream down my face, silent and relentless. Chloe's expression softened from shock to concern. Without a word, she shifted the baby, reached out and pulled me into a tight, crushing hug. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just held me as I finally fell apart on her doorstep. I had won. I had destroyed them all. And I had never in my entire life felt more lost. Chloe's house was a universe away from my sterile penthouse. It smelled of laundry detergent, baby powder, and something baking in the oven. Toys were scattered across a well-worn rug and family photos covered the walls. It was lived in. It was real. She led me to her kitchen, sat me down at a cluttered table and pushed a mug of hot tea into my hands. The baby, a little girl with curious eyes, gummed a teething ring on a blanket on the floor. "Start talking," Chloe said, her voice gentle but firm. No pretense, no corporate politeness. This was the friend who had stormed a hotel room for me. The story came out in fits and starts. Not the sanitized version the press had printed, but the raw, ugly truth. The years of planning. The cold satisfaction of watching Liam's company crumble. The calculated move in the boardroom. The hospital. The USB drive. The hotel balcony. The asylum. I told her about the cold, empty silence that had followed it all. She listened without interruption, her face a canvas of shifting emotions. Shock, horror, a flicker of old anger, and finally, a deep, profound sadness. When I finished, the mug of tea was cold in my hands. The silence in the kitchen was heavy. "Elara," she said finally, her voice soft. "By God. What did they do to you?" It wasn't the question I expected. I expected judgment, maybe. Or fear. But her words held only a heartbreaking pity. Not for them. For me. "They didn't make me do this, Chloe," I said, my voice hollow. "I chose it. Every step." "I know," she replied. "But the person who started this, the girl I knew in college, she wouldn't have chosen this. They broke something in you long before you started breaking them." She reached out and covered my hand with hers. It was warm. "You won. But what did you win? Empire built on graves. A throne in an empty room." The baby gurgled, drawing our attention. Chloe smiled, a tired, genuine smile. "This is Mia. The world's most demanding boss." She looked from her daughter back to me. "This is what life is, Elle. It's messy and loud and it doesn't follow a business plan. It's this." She gestured around the chaotic, loving kitchen. "Not that." She pointed vaguely in the direction of the city skyline, toward my glass tower. I stayed for hours. We didn't talk about Liam or Vanessa or my father. We talked about her life. Her husband, Mark, came home, a friendly, unassuming man who taught history at the local high school. He shook my hand, called me Elara without a title, and immediately started wrestling with Mia, making her shriek with laughter. I watched them, this simple, happy family, and felt a pang of something so acute it was physical. It was a longing for a life I had never known was possible. A life my mother would have wanted for me. Driving back to the penthouse that night, the silence felt different. It wasn't powerful anymore. It was lonely. The gleaming marble and floor-to-ceiling windows seemed cold and dead. I stood in the middle of my vast living room, and for the first time I saw it for what it was. A beautifully decorated tomb. The next morning I went to the office, but my heart wasn't in it. The reports on my desk, the merger proposals, the stock figures, they all seemed like meaningless numbers on a page. I had built this to honor my mother, but was this what she would have wanted? A legacy of ruin and isolation? Mr. Sterling came in with a stack of documents to sign. "The final dissolution of Croft Enterprises assets," he said, placing them before me. A formality, really. There's nothing left. I picked up the pen. This was it. The final signature. The last page of their story. My victory would be complete, absolute, and utterly barren. I couldn't do it. I put the pen down. Leave them, Edward. Mr. Sterling blinked. I'm sorry, so Hart. The assets. Don't dissolve them. Create a trust. A blind trust. Use whatever's left to pay off the remaining creditors. Whatever is left over. I don't know. Donate it. To a fund for victims of corporate fraud. The words felt strange in my mouth. They weren't part of the plan. Mr. Sterling looked utterly bewildered. This was not the ruthless, calculating client he knew. Are you certain? No, I said honestly. But do it anyway. After he left, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my driver and told him to take me to the cemetery. The Hart family plot was on a manicured hill overlooking the city. My father and Diana were buried side by side under a pretentious, ugly angel. I didn't spare them a glance. I walked to the simpler, older plot at the edge of the section. My mother's grave. The headstone was plain marble engraved with her name, Leora Hart. Beloved mother. The dates were too close together. I knelt on the grass, the dew soaking through the expensive fabric of my trousers. I hadn't been here since the funeral. I'd been too angry, too focused on my mission of vengeance to confront the raw grief underneath. Mom, I whispered, my voice cracking. The wind rustled the leaves of a nearby oak tree. I did it. I got them all. I destroyed everyone who hurt you. I got your company back. It's bigger than ever. I waited as if expecting an answer. There was only the sound of the wind. And I'm so empty, I confessed, the tears coming now, hot and unchecked. I thought it would feel like you. I thought winning would feel like having you back. But it just feels like more of you is gone. I became like them to destroy them, and now I don't know how to come back. I laid the small bouquet of lilies, her favorite, against the cold stone. I'm sorry, I breathed. I'm so sorry I forgot what you actually stood for. It wasn't just winning. It was building. It was creating. It was kindness. I stayed there until my tears dried and the sun began to dip below the skyline. I felt drained but lighter. As if I had finally laid down a burden I'd been carrying for a decade. The change in me was subtle at first at Ethereum. I stopped the aggressive, predatory acquisitions. I diverted funds from a hostile takeover and instead launched an incubator for green tech startups. I instituted a company-wide living wage, far above the industry standard. The board grumbled about profit margins. I didn't care. I started having lunch in the employee cafeteria instead of at five-star restaurants. I learned names. I asked about people's kids. At first they were terrified, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Slowly, tentatively, they started to believe it was real. I didn't forget the past. I couldn't. But I stopped letting it dictate my future. One afternoon I found myself driving back to the asylum. I hadn't planned to. My car just seemed to find its way there. Dr. Evans was, as always, obsequiously welcoming. C.O. Hart. An unexpected pleasure. I'd like to see them, I said, my voice calm. He led me to the secure wing. We didn't go to the treatment rooms. We went to the common area. It was sunny with large windows and comfortable chairs. A few patients were watching television or reading. Liam was in a wheelchair by the window, a blanket over his knees. He was still catatonic, his gaze fixed on some point in the distant sky. A nurse was patiently trying to feed him applesauce. He didn't respond. I felt a twist in my gut. This wasn't victory. This was tragedy. I found Vanessa in a corner, surrounded by art supplies. She was painting. Not the frenzied, chaotic scribbles I might have expected, but something with a strange, focused intensity. She was painting the sea. A turbulent, dark gray sea under a stormy sky. And in the water, barely visible, was the outline of a woman's face, her expression serene amidst the chaos. She looked up as I approached. There was no fear this time. No recognition either, really. Just a blank curiosity. The water is cold, she said, her voice matter-of-fact. Yes, I agreed softly. It is. I looked at her painting. It was disturbingly good. It was full of a terror and a beauty that her sane self could never have accessed. Do you need anything, Vanessa? I asked, the name feeling strange on my tongue. She considered this, her head tilted. Yellow, she said finally. I need more yellow. I nodded to a nurse. See that she gets whatever colors she needs. I turned to leave. As I reached the door, her voice stopped me. She's not angry anymore. I froze, my hand on the door frame. I didn't turn around. Who? The lady in the water, Vanessa said, her voice dreamy. She's just waiting. I left the asylum, my heart pounding. It was just the rambling of a madwoman. But it felt like a message. An absolution I hadn't known I needed. The final piece of my past came knocking a week later. It was a woman mid-60s with a kind, weary face and a no-nonsense demeanor. She was waiting in my reception area. Miss Hart, she said, standing as I approached. My name is Evelyn Croft. Liam's mother. I stared. I hadn't seen her since before the bankruptcy, since before the scandal. She had retreated from public life entirely. The woman before me wasn't the formidable society matron I remembered. She was dressed simply, her hair gone gray, but her eyes were clear and direct. Mrs. Croft, I said, my voice neutral. Would you like to come to my office? She nodded. We sat across from each other, the vast desk between us. She didn't seem intimidated by the surroundings. I'm not here to make excuses for my son, she began, her voice firm. What he did to you is unforgivable. The choices he made, they were his own. He was weak and vain, and he threw away everything of value for a pretty illusion. She looked down at her hands folded in her lap. I failed him. I was so focused on the business, on the legacy, that I didn't see the character he was lacking. I thought ambition was enough. It wasn't. She looked up, meeting my gaze. Her eyes were filled with a deep, unshakable sorrow, but no self-pity. I lost my husband to that business. I lost my son to his own weakness. I've lost everything but my self-respect. She took a deep breath. I'm here because I heard what you did. With the remaining assets. Paying off the creditors. The donation. She shook her head slowly. It was an act of grace. One my son never deserved. One I certainly don't deserve. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet jewelry box. She placed it on the desk and pushed it toward me. This was my mother's, she said. It's not worth much. But it's real. I want you to have it. Not as an apology. Those are worthless. But as an acknowledgement. Of your loss. And of your unexpected mercy. I opened the box. Inside was a simple, beautiful pearl pendant on a silver chain. Thank you, I said, my throat tight. It was the first genuine human connection I'd had with anyone from that world in a very long time. I'm moving, she said, standing up. Upstate. To be near my sister. I won't bother you again. She left without another word. I sat there for a long time holding the pearl necklace. It felt heavy with history, with regret, with a strange kind of peace. That night I went back to Chloe's house unannounced. She opened the door, Mia on her hip again. I'm intruding, I said. You are, she said with a smile. Come in. We're ordering pizza. I sat on their couch, ate greasy pizza, and let Mia drool on my designer blouse. I told them about Evelyn Croft's visit. About the pearl necklace. Mark whistled. That's big. That's real. Chloe nodded, her eyes knowing. So what now, Elle? The revenge tour is over. The empire is secure. Who is Alara Hart now? I looked around the cozy, messy living room at my friend, her husband, their beautiful, drooling daughter. I don't know, I said. And for the first time that uncertainty didn't feel like a weakness. It felt like a beginning. But I think I'd like to find out. The pizza box was empty, the crusts scattered like battled debris across the coffee table. Mia was asleep in my arms, a warm, heavy weight, her breath soft against my neck. The scent of baby shampoo and pepperoni was a strange, comforting perfume. In this messy, lived-in room, the ghosts of my past felt distant, less substantial. Chloe's question hung in the air, simple and profound. Who is Alara Hart now? I don't know, I had said. And it was the truest thing I'd uttered in years. The next morning I didn't go straight to the Ethereum Tower. I drove to the cemetery again. The lilies I'd left were wilted, their petals brown and curled. I cleared them away and sat on the grass beside my mother's headstone. I met Liam's mother yesterday, I told the silent marble. She gave me a pearl. She said it was an acknowledgement. I traced the letters of my mother's name. I think I'm tired of destroying things, Mom. I think I want to try building something instead. Something that doesn't have a price tag. The wind rustled the leaves, a gentle, whispering sound. Felt like an answer. Back in the penthouse, the silence was different. It wasn't an emptiness to be filled with scheming. It was a canvas. I stood at the window, not seeing the skyline as a kingdom I'd conquered, but as a city full of people whose lives were as complex and messy as mine had become. I called Mr. Sterling. Edward, cancel my meetings for the day. And draft a proposal. I want to spin off the Leora Heart Foundation from Ethereum. Completely separate. Fully endowed. I want it to be the primary focus of my work from now on. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Yo, Hart. Lara. That is a significant strategic shift. The board will have questions. Let them, I said, my voice calm but firm. And Edward, the Foundation's first initiative. I want it to be a state-of-the-art psychiatric care and research center. Focused on trauma and rehabilitation. Not containment. I could almost hear his sharp intake of breath. He knew exactly what I was referring to. I'll see to it immediately, he said, his professional demeanor snapping back into place. The board put up a fight, of course. They saw it as a dilution of assets, a distraction from shareholder value. I didn't argue. I simply presented my case with a new kind of certainty, one that wasn't fueled by anger but by purpose. To my surprise, it was more effective. They eventually relented, perhaps sensing that the ruthless CEO they knew had been replaced by someone they couldn't predict and therefore couldn't control. The foundation became my life's work. We didn't just write checks. We built. The Leora Heart Center for Healing rose on the outskirts of the city, all light and glass and gardens, a stark contrast to the sterile institution that housed Liam and Vanessa. We recruited the best doctors, not just the most expensive ones. We focused on therapies that nurtured creativity and connection. Art, music, horticulture. I visited often, not as a benefactor making rounds, but as a quiet presence. I'd walk the gardens, sometimes talk to the patients. I never went to the secure wing where Liam and Vanessa were. That chapter was closed. They were receiving the best care available now, but their fate was their own. I had finally, truly released them. One afternoon, about a year after the center opened, I was reading a proposal for a new music therapy program when my assistant buzzed. Ms. Hart? There's a young woman here to see you. A Ms. Rivera. She says she has an appointment about the scholarship fund. I frowned, checking my calendar. I had no such appointment. Send her in. The woman who entered was in her early 20s, dressed in clean but worn clothes. She had intelligent, nervous eyes and held a folder tightly against her chest. Miss Hart, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Thank you for seeing me. My name is Maria Rivera. My mother, she worked for your family. A long time ago. A cold trickle of dread went down my spine. The servants. The ones Diana had dismissed when Vanessa tried to poison me. I had been so consumed with my own drama, I'd never given them a second thought. Please sit, I said, my mouth dry. Maria sat on the edge of the chair. My mother was your cook. Sonora Diaz dismissed them all that week, you remember? Before the exams. I nodded, unable to speak. My mother, she saw things. Maria's eyes met mine, and there was no fear in them, only a grim determination. She saw your stepsister in the kitchen that morning, acting strangely. She thought nothing of it until later when you got sick, and then the girl was rushed to the hospital. She opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of handwritten pages in Spanish. A diary. My mother was a proud woman. She didn't want to cause trouble. But she wrote it all down. She knew what she saw. She knew that girl put something in your milk. She tried to tell your father, but he wouldn't listen. He said she was a hysterical woman causing trouble. She pushed the photocopies across the desk. She kept this for years. She passed away last winter. I found it when I was going through her things. I was going to throw it away. It was old history. But then I read about your foundation. About the center. I thought, maybe you should have it. I took the papers with trembling hands. The script was looping, elegant. I couldn't read most of it, but I didn't need to. The truth was in Maria's eyes. It was a final, devastating confirmation of everything I'd known but had never been able to prove. A witness. All these years, there had been a witness my father had ignored. Thank you, Maria, I managed to say, my voice thick. This, this means more than you know. She nodded. There's one more thing. She took a deep breath. I'm studying psychology. I want to work in trauma therapy. I applied for the Foundation's scholarship. I looked at her, this brave young woman carrying her mother's truth, seeking to build a future from the rubble of my past. The symmetry was breathtaking. Consider it done, I said. And, would you be interested in an internship? Here at the center? We need people who understand that the past isn't just something to be studied. It's something to be healed. Her face broke into a radiant, hopeful smile. It was the first truly uncomplicatedly happy expression I'd seen directed at me in a decade. After she left, I sat for a long time holding the photocopied pages. I thought about my father, about his willful blindness, his choice to protect his fragile new family over the truth. The anger I expected to flare didn't come. Instead, I felt a deep, weary sadness for him. He had died clinging to a lie and in doing so had missed out on ever knowing his real daughter. I had the diary professionally translated. The account was meticulous, heartbreaking. The cook's fear, her loyalty to my mother's memory, her frustration at being silenced. I had it placed in a safe, along with the pearl necklace from Evelyn Croft. They were artifacts from a war that was over. The work of the Foundation filled my days with a purpose that felt clean, untainted by the past. We expanded, funding community centers, shelters, programs for kids who had been dealt a bad hand. I wasn't just writing checks, I was listening. Bernie. The world was so much bigger and more complicated than the gilded cage of betrayal I'd been trapped in. Chloe and Mark became my anchors. I was Auntie Elle to Mia, who was now a toddling, chaotic whirlwind of joy. I spent weekends at their house, covered in finger paint and glitter, learning how to assemble incomprehensible plastic toys. It was the hardest and most rewarding work I'd ever done. One Sunday, while Mia napped and Mark was grilling in the backyard, Chloe handed me a glass of iced tea and said, "You know, you're almost normal now." I laughed. Almost. "Well, you still have that terrifying CEO vibe you can turn on when you need to," she said, grinning. "But it's not your default setting anymore." He grew serious. "I'm proud of you, Elle. You didn't just survive them. You outgrew them." Her words stayed with me. Outgrew them. I hadn't just sought revenge or even justice. I had, against all odds, built a life that was bigger than their capacity to destroy. My mother's legacy wasn't Ethereum. It was the person I had finally chosen to become. The final loose end from my past arrived in the form of a plain, legal envelope. It was from the law firm handling the perpetual care trust for Liam and Vanessa. Liam had passed away in his sleep, peacefully without ever regaining consciousness. His body had simply finally given up. I felt a quiet pang of sorrow, not for the man he became, but for the boy he might have been, for the future we had both so carelessly obliterated. I instructed the lawyers to handle the arrangements with discretion. There would be no service. He would be cremated and his ashes scattered at sea. It seemed fitting. A week later I went to the coast. I stood on a lonely, windswept cliff, the same stretch of water that had taken my father and Diana churning below. A representative from the funeral home handed me a simple wooden box. I opened it. The wind caught the fine gray ash inside, pulling it out in a long, swirling plume, carrying it away over the waves until there was nothing left. I stood there for a long time watching the sea. I thought about Vanessa's painting, about the lady in the water who was no longer angry, just waiting. I thought about my mother. I hoped she was at peace. I hoped Liam was too, in whatever form that took. When I turned to leave, I felt a sense of closure so deep it was almost physical. The last thread tying me to that old life had been severed. Driving back to the city, I didn't go to the penthouse or the office. I went to the Leora Heart Center. It was evening and the setting sun set the glass walls on fire. I walked through the gardens where a few patients were enjoying the cool air. In the art studio I saw a familiar figure. Vanessa. She was at an easel, her focus absolute. She wasn't painting the sea anymore. She was painting a garden. It was wild and overgrown, bursting with color, vivid yellows, deep reds, lush greens. In the center of the garden was a single majestic oak tree. She didn't look up as I approached. She was lost in her world of color. A therapist stood nearby. "She's been working on this for weeks," she said quietly. "It's a huge shift from her previous themes." "It's beautiful," I whispered. Vanessa dipped her brush in a pot of yellow paint. the yellow she'd asked me for, and added a final, brilliant highlight to a sunflower. She put the brush down and finally noticed me standing there. She didn't smile, but her expression was calm, untroubled. "The garden needs a guardian," she said, her voice clear. I looked at the painting, at the strong, silent oak tree. "I think it has one," I said. She considered this, then nodded slowly, turning back to her work. Our interaction was over. It was the most peaceful exchange we had ever had. I left the center and got into my car. The city lights were beginning to twinkle on. For the first time, they didn't look like a circuit board of power and transactions. They looked like homes, like lives being lived. I started the engine, but I didn't drive toward the skyscrapers. I navigated toward the neighborhood of quiet, modest houses. I was expected for dinner. Mia was insisting on macaroni and cheese, and I had promised to be the one to stir the pot. I was a Lara Hart. Philanthropist. Friend. Auntie. I was the keeper of my mother's memory and the architect of my own future. The past was a place I had visited, a lesson I had learned, but it was no longer my home. I was finally completely free.